Recording in progress. We are here at the Banksia Pathway webinar. We do this every week, and our Banksia Pathway students, for lack of a participants, people who are doing the course online, they join me every week. And today we're going to do a recording with Chantel and Marg, who we're going to discuss scheduling and the practicalities of keeping an organized brain when you're a practitioner. Is that about right?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Bloody wonderful. Before we get on, first thing I want to ask is, as practitioners, when we think about the amount of jobs we've got to do within the role, can you list on your fingers what you've got to do? What are your deliverables? And do you know what I mean when I say deliverables? Yep. All right. Tell me what they are. I'll count them.
Your risk assessment, you've got an interim behaviour support plan, you've got the training that you need to do in the behaviour support plan, you've got then your functional behaviour assessment, you've got then to write your comprehensive behaviour support plan, train your comprehensive behaviour support plan, and all of that. You also need to upload everything to Proda. And then you have to look at your implementation schedule, review letter, care team meetings.
So that's exhausting me. It's just saying all of those things. I look at that and go, oh, there's lots in that. There's lots in that. Much harder for your brain to conceptualize what actually you need to do and in what order. Mark, would you add anything to that, or do you think that Shen's got it?
Look, I think she's probably got it. I'm very new to this work, and that my focus is just implementing the work. The paper side, I'll leave that to Chantel. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it's a really good point you
what
made.
she said. Yeah. All I want to do is implement the plan and train the staff and get to the bottom of the behaviours and do that. And I know there's all that other stuff too, and I'm learning about that and I'm learning to do it. But yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's just target it down to exactly what you said, Shen. You've got a risk assessment, an interim plan with or without restrictive practice protocols, or a safety plan, right? Whichever way you want to call it. You do your FBA and what's included in the FBA: interviews, observations, assessments. Okay. Then you've got your FBA, then you've got your behavior support plan, then you've got training, right? Developing and training and developing skill building with your participant. However that looks would depend on your participant. How do you measure if it's working? You may do a monthly or a quarterly progress report, for example. You're collecting data. So that's how you're not just implementing the plan, you're also collecting data on whether it's working, the fidelity of how it's being implemented, and then you're measuring the success of your staff or the team or the participant satisfaction, hopefully a combination of all three. Then you're doing your review. The review of the plan, obviously, I will do it every 10 months. I don't wait. I do it every 10 months so that I've got plenty of time to do my collaboration. So if you've got 10 participants and you've got 8 clients, if you've got 10 participants and you've got 8 documents that you've got to do for each participant, that's 80 documents a year.
Wow, I never thought about it like that.
We only work 48 weeks a year. So this is the thing that I like to make sure when we talk about the practice of behavior support and the documentation. Some people are more confident with documentation than others. I am somebody who sits in the middle. I have a very structured way I go about my practice that I'd like to share with you, and then happy to answer any questions that you might have. We all know the timing for the interim plan. How long do you have between accepting a referral and getting an interim plan that includes restrictive practices? How long have you got?
30 days.
4 weeks, 30 days. Excellent. Why do we have 30 days? Tell me the reason for that.
Because we need to identify if there are restrictive practices, and then we need to let the commission know.
And what's the purpose of writing it in the first place?
Is to analyze the risk, and then, you know, we may be able to put some very
mitigate it.
Safety stuff in place.
Mitigate risk.
Mitigate
Bang
risk.
on. Mitigate risk. That's it. I like to call the interim plans quick and dirty. Okay, they have to be quick and dirty. You haven't got time to do a functional assessment. You don't have time to get into the nuts and bolts or be the detective that we want to be. We have to declare what the ERPs are or what we're recommending that they are, because this person's safety usually is an imminent risk. We need to assess that imminent risk, and we need to mitigate it as quickly as we possibly can and support the people around our participant as best and as quickly as we can. So we do an interim plan. Some of the tools that I will use in an interim plan is always going to be my risk assessment template. My risk assessment, you've got one in the pathway. There's a couple of them in the pathway. Assess the risk as quickly as you can, usually through an intake. And then once you've done that, you can then assess whether or not there are restrictive practices either in place already or they need to be put in place. I use lots of tools throughout all of my work to save me time. So, for example, I'm using a Fathom note taker today, and I have AI consent for my participants and my participants' representatives. I'll ask a whole heap of questions as part of my risk assessment and my interim template that I follow. I will record that conversation with whomever I need to discuss, and then I will type it up. Once it's typed up, if I'm missing something, I go back to my Fathom note, my recording, and I will ask my Fathom recording for specific information from the transcript. So I don't have a lot of time, and I need to save my time where I can. And I usually will take anywhere between 5 to potentially 10 hours to draft up my interim plan, especially if they require restrictive practice protocols. So if you know you've got a client in your calendar, if you know you've got a client that requires an interim plan, you have to book that client in. For me, I get most of my information through my intake. My intake assessment is 4 hours. It's 2 hours of a client time that I spend with the client, or my employee spends with the client through an intake. That assesses all the risks. That whole interview is inclusive of a risk assessment. Then I spend 2 hours drafting an intake report, and that 2 hours of intake report will usually be the very bare bones of an interim plan.
Yeah.
So you've got 4 hours there. If you need to generate an interim plan, I would then put in my calendar 6 hours. 6 hours to finish my interim plan. That's my interim plan done. And I can usually do it in a week. Then I send it, I give my consents to everyone to see it, and I give them a deadline. If you need to give me feedback on this interim plan by this date, and I give them not a quick turnaround. If I haven't heard from you by this date, I'm sending the consents to the commission and I'll upload. So the key with this quick turnaround is to do as much as you can in the time you've got, but to ask very targeted, very pointed questions from our participants. We do not want to ask them more questions again and again and again. That is the opposite of trauma-informed care. And sometimes we won't get the right answers from them that we need, so we have to ask multiple people. Yeah. And when I say the right answers, I mean the depth of questions sometimes. And sometimes it's not appropriate to ask our participants. Sometimes we need to ask their representatives about the risk. So right there, I schedule in my interim. From my interim, I have a maximum of 6 months, maximum. But I don't take 6 months. I take probably 3. So 3 months ahead, I look at my client's service journey, the client journey. I know that they're going to require a certain amount of support work. I don't do a lot of implementation from the interim. I'm asking more questions. I don't believe in implementing, it's going to sound weird, from an interim when I will implement a safety plan and train a safety plan, but I won't be implementing anything more than that. I don't know enough yet. So that the 3 months after that, I will plan a person's service around what am I looking for? What are the precision problems I'm looking for? So in my calendar, I will have anywhere between sometimes 12 to 20 hours of time that I will spend generating the information and asking the questions and spending time with my participant. So let's say a maximum of 20 hours to complete the functional behavioral assessment. But that's inclusive of all my assessments that I need to complete, my observations, my interviews, and writing up the report. So right there for every client, I've got 30 hours already that I've delivered them in this service in the first 3 months. It obviously the hours are going to change depending on the person, but that's what I'd look at. Once you've developed your behavior support plan, you're moving into that stage now. I like to think that our clients, my general rule of thumb with most clients is their FBA and their BSP will usually take, depending on the complexity, depending on if they're a new client, if they're an existing client, they won't take anywhere near as long. But let's say they're a new client in my service, they might take up to 30 hours in total to complete those 2 documents because of the amount of time I've spent asking questions, observing, and finding out information that I don't have. Now, if you've only got a participant who's got 60 hours and that's all they've got, then you need to make those hours count. While I'm writing the behavior support plan, I'm usually crafting in my head what I call practice guides. Practice guides are documents that I will generate that are resources that I can then either do a quick recording of, generate a recording. We're talking about training. Sometimes we can't get all the people in the room. So I will do a recording of the training on the basis of the practice guide. Slap a QR code on it or a link to what it is, password protected so that it's nice and secure. And there's some training that you can be giving that's quite easy, and it doesn't, you don't have to travel to the person. You can do it via a platform like this. This is simple ways of efficient sort of training. But then what I normally do, I want to make sure that the people who are working with my participant, they've done that training. They've watched that 15-minute video before they've come to me, so that when I see them, I like to see my participants monthly, usually. I also like to see my participants' care teams monthly and sometimes more frequently for training for the first 6 months. So in my calendar, I'm going to book in a monthly observation, if not work, with my participant. And a monthly catch-up that's separate to my work with participant with the care team. If it's a particularly complex young person, I work with children and young people, I'll actually have a monthly debrief as well. So a monthly incident debrief. So it will be separate from the training and separate from the time that I spend with the participants. So right there, I've got 3 hours of just contact, direct contact with the team or with the participant. And then I've got my progress notes associated with that. So if I've got my clients past that documentation phase, I'm booking these in every month. Then I'm writing a progress report. So I have a small group of participants that I see, but they're very complex. So I do a monthly progress report for each of my participants. So that's 4 hours minimum per month. To me, that progress report is so important because, and I go back to this tool that we're using in Fathom. Fathom, or you can use Heidi Health, there are a range of note takers, will record and take transcripts. I have a template that I've created that says a progress report template. What's working? What are the goals we're working towards? What's not working and why? What strategies have we focused on this month? What's the participant's quality of life look like? What do we need more of? And finally, feedback and any barriers to implementation. And then what you're covering is the domain of knowing it works in the capability framework. But I've got that template. So when I do my monthly training and debrief with my teams, I ask those questions. From the Fathom notes, when I say ask, when it comes up, ask Fathom, for example, it will then generate a summary of what was said in that training. The recording's there. I always record everything and send that recording on securely because I believe in that transparency. If not everyone can be in the room, then everyone should have a right to access that information. If that's consented, only if it's consented. But Fathom allows me to directly cut and paste or copy and paste the transcript notes into my report, which cuts down my time. So while it looks like I'm doing a lot, and I am, I'm actually saving a lot of my own brain and cognitive power because I'm getting the feedback directly from the people who are working and in that true collaborative space. So I will program for every client at least 4 hours in my calendar for service for them.
And so, Amy, can I ask a question? Is that for, for this, the implementation, how it works, are you doing that after you've done the FBA and the comprehensive, then you start planning that? So that's when you start doing the MDT, checking in, that type of stuff.
So I will have already, my aim is I will have already established a strong connection through that FBA and behavior support development phase, because I'm constantly asking questions. I'm there. I might be there twice a week. I want to know in that phase. I really want to know. I want to see. I want to observe. I want to check what is already happening and what, like we were talking about earlier, prior to the recording, we talked about what measurements of success are we seeing? What's the variables that we're changing? How are we measuring the interventions that are evidence-based? Are they working? I don't know. We've got to find out. We've got to find out whether or not this is actually something that's helpful for this person and their team. So I'm not suggesting that this is what everyone should do, but I'm suggesting that this formula has always worked. Well, this works for me. And people often, they say, oh, I've got 10 clients, or I've got 15 clients. That's a lot of clients. How can you do quality work with that many clients when we're not therapists? We're not therapists. It's not a rinse and repeat gig. Does that make sense, Chantel?
Yeah, it does. And I guess probably something Marg said earlier, I will often get into the down and dirty and want to start fixing and, getting in there. And then I find my report writing outside of timeframes, because I'm like, oh God, shit, I haven't written, I haven't done that interim, but I've got all this information, but I haven't written it. So that gives me a bit of a framework, I guess, around from when you, and then I guess when you're going over into, the plans, the comp's ending and you're reviewing it, well, then it's like a second set of processes then, isn't it, from the first set?
So I like to think that I can do exactly the same thing for a client with 120 hours of service of funding than a client with 60. Exactly. I'm using the same templates. I'm using the same ways, the same AI. I'm using exactly the same process. The only difference is if I've got a client who probably has 60 hours, I almost certainly will have a client that doesn't have a level, or at least a reported level of complexity. If I've got 60 hours of funding, I do the best with what I've got, but the system, the processes that I have in place doesn't change. I still will do a monthly, sometimes not a monthly for someone with lower or less intensity in terms of their needs, or they don't have restrictive practices, for example. They might instead, what my progress report will be, a very quick monthly. Here's what we talked about. Here's what training we've done. Here's what's working. Here's the client satisfaction. Because again, I'm checking in. Every opportunity that we have to do this allows us to learn more about our participant. And this is something that I've found, and it's anecdotal. This isn't supported by any research, although it might be. I just can't retrieve it right now. The best behavior support work that I've done is after working with the participant for 2 years.
Yeah.
Without question. I need time to learn, and so does the participant, mind you. We need time to learn about each other. We need time to learn what works for them. They need time to trust me. They need time to believe me. I'm asking them sometimes to do things that don't feel normal or natural or okay for them. I'm asking them to trust me, and that takes time. So some of my best work I find happens on the third plan, the third plan period. But the other thing that happens in the third plan period for me, even though that's not probably what the NDIS wants to hear, they want to hear that everything's magically been fine. It's not the case, but I'm certain that's what they want to hear. I often find that the data I've collected over 2 years through those monthly data reports shows me patterns and trends that are as essential for me to then tweak and then readjust and sometimes throw some of the bits of the plan out. So going back to the practical suggestion about how do you put the time in, for every one of my clients at the beginning of their service, I will do a service plan. for their service plan, I will take a look at what their service plan is, and I'll take a look at all their dates. Then I will backward map in my own calendar, and I'm a person who needs to write in one hit. I struggle to write in blocks. It drives me bonkers, so I can't do that. So I will put into my calendar, into the service plan, I will block in the time that I need within the time frames that I have booked in and organized into my calendar. So it's very uncommon for me to actually have any space in my calendar 12 months in 12 months increments. I know exactly when something is due. I know when I've got to do, and that report time is protected. Nothing overrules that, unless there is a severe critical incident or I lose a finger or something. And that goes, but that is time that I don't move around. I don't negotiate with that. That is time that I am writing that report. So for me, I block everything in. If I've got to do a monthly training, I book it in the service plan with the Zoom link in the service plan that everybody knows what it is. Now, let's say that there's 15 people at a care team and no one can come on that date. I'll move some things around. But even if I've got 2 or 3 representatives on that day, I will record the training and then make that training available for the rest of the care team. At the end of the day, we are trying to balance a myriad of both administrative implementing strategies as well as making sure that what we're doing is compliant with our role. So sometimes we're not therapists that can just change appointments around. That's not part that I struggle with people who just expect us to do that. So,
and I've probably built a rod for my own back and done that quite a bit. So, just having to put those boundaries back in place and probably the backward mapping is something that I have heard about, but not actually really done properly. So that's something I think I would benefit from myself, actually sitting down, taking a day, reviewing everything, putting it all into the calendar. So then I've got some sort of organization. Not sure about you, Marg, how you do things, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good, the backwards planning. I find that really helpful. I use that a lot at one of my jobs. But that just sounds really clear, concise and structured, and everything you've talked about, just it's something that I would really benefit from, because I'm actually that sort of a person that needs to know all of that stuff and have it all locked in. That sounds amazing. But just a question, Amy, when you said you're doing the FBA and the BSP at your 30 hours, you're doing lots of observing and questions and everything. You're observing your participant. If you see something happen and maybe think that the support workers could try something different, are you addressing that there and then, or you just sit back still observing to see what they do and how that participant reacts to that and to gather your information?
It's a really good question. So I often won't use that opportunity to train because I believe that I need more information and I like to know what the strengths are of the team that I'm working with. So instead of instructing in that moment, I might ask, is there anything else that you would like to know that you could have done differently, or are you happy with the way that was handled? And I will ask through a reflection. If I'm there and observing and the shit hits the fan, so to speak, I will ask, are you happy with how that went? I'll do a mini debrief if it's appropriate for me to do that. Although there has been an occasion where I was there doing an observation and one of my participants got very, very cross, bit stroppy, stood up and then became very physically aggressive. And I, at the time, was the only one trained, which was really disappointing actually, but I was the only one trained to disengage, to provide a disengagement, a physical disengagement. And that physical disengagement ended up turning into a unauthorized physical redirect, a physical redirect, where I actually had to move this person's body physically around and redirect them in a different direction. So when that happened, I took the opportunity to ask the team that was there, were you prepared for something like this happening? And they weren't. And when I asked the previous behaviours, I was new BSP on the case, and I had no doubt that this was in the previous behavior support plan because I had reviewed it. I didn't write it, but I'd reviewed it. So when I asked, has your team engaged in training on this participant who's known to be quite physically aggressive at times, they weren't. So what it did show was through asking questions, I uncovered a gap in training that I needed to address really fast, really, really quickly. And so after that observation, I was able to generate an observation report. I use an app called Heidi Health. Highly rate Heidi Health. I have it's an AI. It's an AI, but it's based in Australia. It meets all of the privacy requirements, and it's part of my suite of AI tools that I use. When I got in the car after that observation, I would dictate everything that I saw, everything I felt, everything I experienced, what my observations, and it then generates a beautiful SOAP note for me. And then what I would do is extract that SOAP note into an observation report, again, a template that I already have created. What that observation report then does is it sends back to not just the support workers, but the team leader, the person who's responsible for the work health and safety, the implementation module 2 practice framework. I'm sending information to them saying, on this occasion, your team's safety was put at risk because they weren't prepared, they weren't trained to utilize a physical redirect. As a result, I've come in and have completed an unauthorized restrictive practice as a duty of care, but also when I was asking things like, do the team know how to use proximity? Do the team know how to, they didn't know. So it was putting them at risk. As a result of that, I learned a little bit after the fact that team went and completed training, specific training, which was great. It was a good outcome. Didn't help the person who got thumped the first time, but it was good that we learned from that. But that observation allowed me as a separate external person not to tell them what to do, but actually to model what they should be doing. And on this particular occasion, I had to move this person outside and they turned around to come back in. I had to close the door. And this person was cracking, trying to bang on the door. And the support worker was looking at me with horror. And what I ended up saying was, this is duty of care. This person, he's not in any danger. He's banging on a door. He's not breaking the door. He's cranky. He's expressing frustration, but he's not hurting you. If the door wasn't here, he would be hurting you. So it's about, again, understanding the obligations of duty of care, balancing that with dignity of risk. And while I'm observing, I'm also looking at what they understand about that concept. Because there's sometimes when we're doing training as behavior practitioners, a lot of the time we're working really hard to be compliant, absolutely, and follow the rules, but we've also got to protect ourselves and we've got to protect the community and we've got to protect our participant, sometimes from themselves. So yeah, I don't like to be instructive, because when I'm being instructive, I feel like I'm using a different part of my brain than when I'm observing, where I'm actually just being able to watch through a completely unbiased lens. I'm just watching, note-taking, and just scanning and seeing, and again, reading things like antecedents that maybe the staff can't see. So every observation has a report. Everything that I do has something that's documented attached to it. But I use tools that allow me to do that quickly and efficiently. Yeah. I guess for me, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. It's evidence.
And I think, thinking about some of those observations, I'm sure that, some people think especially if you go into a school or they really just want, like a lot of people just want you to have this magic wand and a strategy, but they don't understand what behavior support is. So I find, trying to upskill our families and participants on what behavior support looks like, then also helps them to have an understanding. I do a lot of, if I'm doing an observation, I just write narrative, and then and then I will put that up into an AI like Heidi. I've been using Heidi Health, and that will then help me to pull out the information of, what did you see any, from my documentation, what were the triggers, what were some of the behaviors that I've written about, and then that sort of helps me to formalize some of that ABC data that I think is really important, because one of the things that I struggle with is that, or not struggle with, but it's like, you've got to get data, you've got to get data. Like, there's this big thing around data in the functional behaviour assessment, and, you know, what is the right, if there is such a right data to collect, because it all depends on the family and their circumstances. And just because you create a QR code for one family to record some data, the next family may not be able to have, especially some of the families I work with, they don't have an internet, they don't have a phone. So, you know, we're looking at a paper data where we're doing some tally marks and stuff like that. So I think that something that I'm taking away is that it's yes, you've got some of your standard stuff you do, but then how you get your participants and families on board to collect some data for you is also really, really tricky. I'm not sure if you find that.
Absolutely. And I think that this is the reason why when we triangulate data is a scary word, always been a scary word for me, because I'm dyscalculic, right? So numbers, they, like, seriously, spreadsheets look like Egyptian hieroglyphs to me. I've always said that. I'm one of the only business owners that I know that just can't use a spreadsheet, because but data isn't just numbers. To me,
No.
data is when we use data, information, to generate patterns, to see the picture. We don't just see the behavior. The behavior is not the picture. The person is the picture. The behavior is part of the picture that we need to be able to generate. How did that get to that? So when we look at ABC or STAR data, I believe that we can use that through our observations. We can also use that by asking and doing check-ins with our families. If we're seeing our families fairly frequently, or we're at least talking to them fairly frequently, and it doesn't matter whether your frequency is weekly, or it could be, for some of my participants, when they're in that really critical stage, it could be twice weekly. For some of our participants, it's monthly. A monthly check-in is all they need. But you could have a very, very clear, what are the big issues that we've had that's impacted this person's quality of life? If we get so stuck on the numbers, we forget that the actual reason we're collecting this data is to measure quality of life. So at every single check-in, I'm always focusing on that. And look, you talk to some disciplines in our work. I've got the benefit of having thousands of hours of supervision with a multitude of professional disciplines. Currently, my current supervisor is a clinical psychologist who happens to also be a BCBA. Now, I don't speak a BCBA language specifically, but I'm learning about the science of what I'm learning from my supervisor. My clinical training is I'm not a clinician, I'm an educator. So I've learned about data through my school and education-based work. But I also have spent thousands of hours literally in learning from speech pathologists, occupational therapists, psychologists, behaviorists who call themselves behaviorists and not psychologists, educators, mental health specialists, and nurses, all of whom have taught me that you collect data in very different ways. And some of those ways are very relevant to your participant, their individual case. So how you are using your knowledge of this person, first and foremost, is not just about the numbers, in my opinion, but more so from two tranches. One, it's about the fidelity of the way your strategies have been introduced and have the expectations of the way that they're implemented. So sometimes that's actually a really funny way of saying, if you give a strategy to a parent, are they going to do it the way you've asked them to do it? And if they're not, ask them why. What's the barrier? What's in the way? If you've got a participant over here who is stripping off all their clothes, for example, and you don't know why they're stripping off all their clothes, well, you've got to find out why that is. But if you've trained your workers to tell you through your reporting mechanism, I need to know what's happening before, I need to know where they are. It's typical triggers, setting events, but there are some cases where you're not going to know. So you're not going to be able to collect data that's going to see a trend or a pattern that's this big. You need a trend or a pattern that's much, much bigger. So I think when you are individualizing and you're talking to your participant in that very early service planning phase, and you're measuring, how do you want to talk? How do you want to how do you want to communicate? How do you want to let me know what's working? How do you want me to interact with you? What do you feel comfortable with? The service planning and all the way through is co-designed. So, you know, if you've got a participant, for example, who is quite transient and they don't have a fixed address and they don't have a mobile phone and they're really wanting to work with you, you've got to generate and design a way that they can collect information about themselves or about whom they're representing, for example. Your creativity as a practitioner comes in. That's where it comes in. And that's where some of us in the field are really nervous because they're worried about us doing it wrong. They're worried about doing it wrong when really you just have to ask the question, I don't know how to do this. I need to find a supervisor that can give me a hand. You're not supposed to have all these answers yourself, and you're sure as hell not supposed to have all these answers when you're first starting.
I think that that is something that is a really good reflection piece around quality of life. Because I think we do tend to sometimes get bogged down in, oh, we need the parents to collect the data and all of this stuff. Well, they're that thick in the throes of some of just not even being able to cope that there's no way they're going to be able to do a QR code for you. So it might be, as you say, I'm going to meet with you each week and we're going to discuss that. Like just for an example, I have a participant's mum who I work with who is illiterate. So she can't read, she can't, she's not tech savvy. And so I meet with her fortnightly and we talk about what's been happening from at home and at school. With this participant, it's there, the school's very reluctant to let us in. So, you know, we're just hearing from her, but being able to do those consultations has also been able to help me to understand the family better, understand what the goals are. So that data collection looks very different to what I would do with someone else.
Absolutely. And it's no less valuable.
Yeah.
What we always do is we make sure that we have I call it a disclaimer. It may not be the scientific term for it. It's late at night. I'm tired, sorry. But it's not, I always have, there is limitations to this data because it may be anecdotal.
Yeah.
Anecdotal data may have limitations in bias. It may have, you know, that's why we have to list it. We have to name it, but it doesn't make it any less important or less valid. I think the only data that I find less favor in is that which doesn't include the participant. We must include the participant. We're writing and collecting information about them. It should be inclusive of their opinion, of their views. For most of my participants, I work with predominantly young people with quite significant intellectual disabilities, and most of them are non-speaking. So for me, it's very difficult to use. I use the Deciding with Support toolkit all the time. I have a very heavy emphasis on understanding how this person gives consent or how they give assent, how they demonstrate assent. Because to me, it's really important. And I use that through observation. If I can observe when someone is assenting, I can look at their behavioral profile, and then I can also see when they're dissenting, disagreeing, or not consenting. I can see what their behavioral profile looks like. Then I can teach others as part of my training. Here is what assent for this person looks like. Here is what dissent looks like. If they're doing this, it's not because they're engaging in a behavior of concern. The function of this particular behavior could be they're dissenting. You need to listen to them. So to me, some of the best success I've had as a practitioner is getting that bit right, teaching the care teams to understand that. And then suddenly we see a marked decrease in some of these big behaviors, which we finally understand the function of those behaviors is to demonstrate protest or dissent. The workers are then trained to support that decision and to be creative on how to help that person actually meet what they want and not just continue to push them in the direction they don't want to go in. And I think that that's the other thing. While I've got a fairly structured routine of how I document, I also have a fairly structured routine on how do I gather that information? And sometimes that structure is not the same for everybody. There are some participants that don't want to see me. There are some people who demonstrate dissent when I see them. So my best work with them in their case is actually not working directly with the participant. I will make a point of observing them as frequently as what they're happy for me to do so. At a minimum, it's 4 to 6 times a year, but it might be once every 3 months or once every 2 months, if that's what they are telling me they want, or if they've explained or shown me that they don't want me in their space. Most of my work then will be with the care teams.
Yeah.
I'm still there. I'm still involved. I'm still collecting all the information. I'm still talking to the most important people outside of the immediate circle of this person, but I'm listening to them. And often having someone sit there in your home or in your school or in your after school care or in, soccer, like someone's peering at you, that could be a horrible feeling. So I can understand that. But I also think that my role is to deliver training, but some practitioners don't agree, and I respect this, but I am a trauma practitioner. I'm a trauma-informed practitioner. My role in this person's life is limited. I don't want them to get attached to me. I don't want them to get attached to me. I don't want them to be connected with me, especially as their children, a lot of them. I want them to learn what they need to learn from me, and I need to get out, because the commission, in their wisdom, at any point can come and take me away from them through funding. And I don't want them to be so attached to me as their practitioner, as I'm not their therapist. So I know in the NDIS, the commission can do that too to therapists, but I don't form and believe in forming a therapeutic focused alliance with my participants in most cases, because to me, that's not part of my role. A lot of people will disagree with that, and that's okay. I just don't. I'm a practitioner who very much believes in capacity building, skill building, training, because I might see them 1 hour a week or 1 hour a month, but their families or their care teams are seeing them up to 80 hours a month. They're the people who need the time. Like they're the people who I believe my time I spend supporting and helping them understand the participant. So I hope that that's not too much of a juxtaposition. I spend a lot of time up front with that participant and learn as much as I can about them. I just don't want them to get attached to me in case I have to leave their life because of the commission says no, they don't need a behaviour practitioner anymore. And suddenly they formed an alliance with me that then they lose. And as a trauma practitioner, trauma-informed practitioner, I think that's not trauma-informed care.
And I think it's interesting how it like for me, there's so many different approaches. I'm not sure if you found that, Marg, in your time, is that it's behaviour support is just massive, isn't it?
It is, absolutely, yeah. And I really like that approach, because so many of the participants have so many people that they see, and often attachment and trauma issues, they become very attached, and then it's just more abandonment when practitioners move on, because they have to, because it's not our role to be their friends and be in their lives, to that level, to build those sorts of relationships. So I like what you say about that, Amy.
I appreciate that, Marg. I think, look, I've also got, I have clients that I've worked with for 7 years, and long-term clients, I know them, they know me. And when I say I know them, I'm very, very familiar with what's happening in their life, but they may only see me based on what they want to see me, and that might only be 4 or 5 times a year at this point. Most of my time, that being said, that may be when I see them, I may see them for 4 hours in a row. So I might see them for a day and I might spend half the day with them, or even a full day with them, 4 or 5 times a year. So that if you think about it, that might be 20 hours, but it's split over 5 sessions that I will learn, and that might work for that person. Me going in and seeing them every month or every fortnight, that doesn't work for them. So while the structure that I've described tonight in terms of documentation, how I put everything into my calendar and how I organize myself, I also use another tool called Microsoft Planner. There are tools like Asana is one, Trello is another. These are what we call project management tools that are very, very good at keeping you organized. So, in the middle of the night, I don't know about you, sometimes in the middle of the night, you wake up and you go, holy crap, did I finish that thing that I needed to upload? Or, for me, it's like the remnants of the uni days where you're just trying to spin all the plates in the air. These tools allow me to have a very structured, very quick reference to what's due, when, and how I'm getting organized. So it's my double check. My calendar's there, but if I want to scroll through my calendar, I've got my beautiful Microsoft planner for all of my clients and everyone that I need to be doing things for, every deliverable, when the due date is, and it reminds me of when the due date's coming up. So it keeps me nice and organized. But while I'm very structured and organized in this respect, I'm also planning that. I love that creativity that I get to practice every day with my participants and their families, because that keeps things interesting. If it was just paperwork all the time, there's no way I'd still be in this job.
We've used Planner for lots of other things, but I've just put together some sort of a planner board for our service delivery, which I'm going to go in and fill in where everything's due. And so that's just another, I need those reminders. I need something to say, because yes, I'm not great at putting into my calendar and I don't really have a system at the moment. So I'm trying to implement some of these systems, because I find that I will often put off writing something because I like to work with the family. So I've got to get better at that.
So if you put in your tools that you can use, you can get it to write it for you. And when I say it, if you use something like Heidi Health, you can program it to write your templates for you, and then it's capturing it as you're speaking to the participant or their representatives. So if you don't like writing, many of us don't, most of us don't, that's a tool that you can use and program. It takes a little bit of time to program it up front, but once you've programmed it, there is so much that it can do to help you get you 70 to 80% of the way. And then you're then just refining and fitting it into the version 3 template of the commission. The other thing I'll say about Planner and any of these tools that we've talked about tonight, I don't have an administration. So I'm a one-woman show. So when I say that, my apologies, I've got an employee who's beautiful, but my business is a sole tradership. I have 65 behavior practitioners right across Australia that I clinically supervise externally. I have 30 families that I see in my business. Between myself and my employee, we have 30 clients. Of those 30 clients, the vast majority of them have anywhere between 10 and 20 members of their care teams. So it's not just 30 people, it's 30 times 20, right?
Yeah.
Just that, and I don't have an administration. I have a business manager who pays my bills and makes sure I get paid, but that's about it. So we have to, when you're a sole trader or when you're a subcontractor, you need to get systems in place to make sure that A, you're saving yourself the time that you need to save it for the participants, that you're efficient, and their time is spent on things that are really about what your genius is, the reason they've employed you in the first place. And that isn't always about admin. You need to do the admin, but if you can employ other tools that can help you with that, you are then able to be really efficient and safe and ethical.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely feel that, and we've put that we've added. Well, we've had an AI component in our consent form, but we've actually really made that clear within. We've just redone our whole consent form, so we've really made that clear. And if people are opting out, that's okay.
Because then you just find other ways of doing
That's
it.
exactly right. And we just put an alert so that people are aware that no, an AI tool is not to be used in this instance.
So last thing I want to, before the recording cuts out, you're both doing the pathway. What do you want to tell people watching who may not have done the pathway, not doing the pathway, or maybe thinking about the pathway? Is there anything that you would want to share with them, or is there any final comments before we finish for our weekly webinar tonight?
Do you want to go, Mark, or do you want me to go?
No, you go first.
I guess for me, like I've been a practitioner for 4.5 years now, and have just discovered the pathway. And for me, it's consolidating lots of things that I know, but it's also making me think about some of the, some aspects that I need to go back and revisit and go, oh, I'm actually probably not hitting the mark on that part. And a big thing for me is risk assessment. So we're doing a whole big review of all of our risk assessment procedures and, standard operating procedures and stuff, so that we are capturing what we need to as a part of that very first intake meeting, to then be able to look at the interim. So for me, that's been something that I've been focusing on from the interim part. And I'm probably up to there because I have actually just not rushed through it. I'm like, okay, what am I going to take from this module, from someone who's been doing this for a while, and how can I make my practice, improve my practice? So from me, that's what I'm taking. And I think even if you've been a practitioner for years and you're proficient or whatever, I think that it's a really good reflective practice piece for someone who's been working in the space for a while, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's awesome to hear, because that's why I created it for that reason. And everyone's going to get something different from it. But I'm just glad that you're finding that valuable, not just for your practice, but actually from a wider systems lens. What about you, Mark? You're a new practitioner.
Yeah, I think as a new practitioner, for anyone out there who's thinking about doing it, don't do it unless you're going to go use someone like you, Amy, some sort of a pathway, because there's so much to it that it's obviously it's just simple and it's straightforward. It's like learning to drive a car. For me, I'm still learning to drive the manual. You're doing it so automatically, and you've mastered driving this manual. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend anyone try and do this without the support of a pathway. This is, it's absolutely needed.
And do you find, Mark, that what you've done so far in the training, has it helped you understand your role a little bit better than before?
Absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely has. I mean, I'm a mother of an adult with a disability, and to be honest, with all these behaviour support plans, and they'd be ringing me up, they're doing this now, they're doing this, and I probably a little bit of burnout there when it comes to that. But it's like I'd never. I can look at it now very differently because I understand what they're actually doing and why they're doing it. And it's like, oh, another phone call with more questions and that sort of thing before. Whereas now I can see the work, the enormous amount of work that goes into this, and the time and the resources, and just to get it right, to get it fine-tuned and everything, and the constant, consistent observing and everything that needs to happen with it. It makes the big picture, the puzzle pieces all come together.
Oh, I appreciate that. I think the last thing I'll say is that the weekly webinars are an opportunity for everybody to come and ask these questions, because the role, this is it. I'll pull it out for you. This is the pathway, all printed out. And actually, I think there's one missing because there's 8 of these. The pathway is huge, as you know. And I'm so glad, Chantel, that you're able to say, I'm not rushing. I'm actually taking my time going through systematically and unpacking each resource. You've paid for this resource. You will not use it all up front. I've still got people who did this at the beginning of last year, go back, take this, and they're like, I've got to go back because it sits on their desk all day. Like they use these resources all the time. So it's nice to hear both of you explain that. I really
think
appreciate
if I had something like this right back at the beginning of my journey, I would have felt a lot more confident a lot sooner, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I think from a whole of practice perspective is that part of what I would do if introducing new practitioners into my business would be this training is part of your onboarding package. And we've spoken about that, Amy. And I just think it's really, really important that, because I don't know about you, Marg, but sometimes you're just thrown in and they're like, go and do this. And you're like, well, what is that?
What is that? Yeah. What is it? And why am I doing it again? Yeah. And there's so much risk. We carry so much risk.
We do.
I mean, if we do the wrong thing, we can get into a lot of trouble.
And ignorance isn't an excuse anymore. It never was, but
No.
it's certainly not now. And I think that this pathway is the reason I created it was because of so many practitioners I work with right across Australia. They had foundational questions that really should have had answered by their employer. Even if they're subcontractors, their employer is still even a contractor. So the pathway was created so that we could feel confident and competent in our work and in our role and in our responsibility as behavior practitioners. I'm going to stop the recording, but I just want to say thank you, everybody. Just hold on 1 second for me, and I'll just say thank you off camera, but I really appreciate it. One moment.